believe it or not, food at Washington Avenue at a place called Winks Dairy Bar. He was drawn to that place. He was drawn to Winks. But it was more than just the food. It ended up being a young lady named Jan Dykes Patton. And that's what really drew him. And of course, he started asking her out, but you know, he wasn't exactly where Jan maybe wanted to be spiritually. I don't know, you know, because she just didn't feel comfortable going out with him at first, but she got pushed into it, and people kept saying, you know, you need to go out with that boy, and so she decided to go. And you can guess where Benny had to take her, to church. And Benny couldn't understand that for a while, you know, like, everything's got to be a church date, you know. We're talking about somebody from the Craig farm, you know, and I gotta take her to church. But before long, you know, you can't keep Benny down at all. And he found a loophole in the system. And he even testified about it. Where else can you go on a date and all it costs you is a little gas money and $1 in the offering? And then, you know, if you really wanted to splurge and treat her really nice, well, they could drive through Taco Bell on the way home and share something off the dollar menu. That was Benny Patton. You couldn't keep him down. I thought I've had him several times, but you can't keep that boy down. He always had things to say and come out on top. But once the good Lord and Jan, I'm not sure who was working on him the most right in there, but they kind of corralled him around, and Jan's taste went up a little bit in food, and I guess probably whoever was taking the offering must have held the plate in front of him a little bit longer, because that dollar didn't work out so much in the long run. But Benny loved going to church, and he came to church more and more, and enjoying his new family, because we were like bone to bone and flesh to flesh. He knew people we knew people he knew, and we were just like family. And he was enjoying church, but sometimes whenever we invite our neighbor to church, sometimes it's a big step to go from wherever they're going to church. If they're going to a denominational or traditional church, or sometimes almost a formal church. Well, then all of a sudden they come into a Pentecostal service and somebody comes breezing by them, you know, and they're wondering what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, they're subject to about lifting holy hands. Psalms 47, or I'm sorry, that was 1 Timothy. But Psalms 47 talks about shout with the voice of triumph. And then, of course, you could even be around the Acts, the 2nd chapter experience, where people are acting almost like drunk people, because that's what they thought on the day of Pentecost. But some of that stuff, people have to kind of adapt to, because it's so different. And a lot of that was going through Benny's mind. He told me this story. It was kind of like a place where he came to where he had to make a decision one way or another. And he was on Upper Steel Bend Road and thinking about church. It was church night. And when he got to the stop sign, he sat there a second. Because the Bible talks about counting the cost, Luke 14. And that's what Benny was doing. He was counting the cost. I don't know that he knew about Luke 14, but he still knew about counting the cost as a country boy. He sat there thinking, if I turn left, my life's going to pretty well be the same. It'll be stable. My life will be stable, but at least it'll be familiar. You know, it'll be nothing new. But if I turn right, there's no telling what's coming.
Right.
If I turn right toward Walter Estes, what in the world am I going to be getting into?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we all know the story. He turned right toward the Walter Estes Church. And he got into everything that he could.
Yes.
We know that. But Benny loved life in church. But he ran into some opposition with his parents. And you'd have to know his daddy, Brother Benny John. You just have to know him. I'm guessing it's hard to say how tall he was because he was just so big, but I'm guessing 6'2", 6'3", maybe 400 pounds. And he had a hand like a pork ham. I mean, his fingers were like, he was just huge. Well, the first thing he told his daddy, I got the Holy Ghost. His daddy said, you got the Holy what? He said, boy, I'm going to tell you right now, don't you be trying to bring that stuff home to me and your mama. I'm going to tell you right now, don't you bring it home. And so, when Big B spoke, everybody listened, that's for sure, especially Benny, because he came up knowing what Big B said he meant. But Benny prayed and he believed for his family, but they didn't show any interest. And Benji and Brother Crawford spoke about the accident that Benny was in. Sometimes, Brother Rowan and I talked about this many times. He said, Lord, save my children at all costs.
Whatever it takes,
and then
yes.
he says, what's the second line, Brother Bill?
Whatever it takes.
But he would say, and then I pray, Lord, help me to accept the consequences.
Yes.
And so when we say, Lord, save our children, whatever it takes, and we all say that and believe it. And I'm not saying that's what it took for Benny to have the accident, for his parents to be saved, but that's the way it worked out. Benny had a terrible accident, as everybody said. The doctor said you'll never walk, paralyzed. And the outpouring from the churches, from co-workers, and everybody involved with Benny was there in the waiting rooms and the chapels and praying for Benny. And it was continuous like that for a long time. And all the time Benny was working and getting just a little bit better, but people still prayed, grabbing hold of the horns of the altar, and believing and praying for Benny. Well, Benny got just a little bit better, and all of a sudden his daddy called him and said, son, if you don't mind, me and your mama's going to go to church tonight. And I hope that's all right with you, son. And of course, Benny said, that's fine. He said, those people have been so nice and so good, we just want to go be in church with them. And that's what Benny had been trying to get for a long time. And of course, we know the story. Brother and Sister Pate both became faithful, Holy Ghost filled saints.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I mean faithful.
Yes.
They were economically challenged, like a lot of us are. They come from country places, but Brother Pate had a severe surgery. I think it took like 8 or 10 hours. And Dad opened the tithe book to Brother Pate's page, like $15 a week, whatever it was. And he held that up to God. Said, Lord, look how faithful this man has been to you. Look how faithful this man has been in his giving. Because God knows he couldn't afford to give a single penny, living in poverty. But God honored his giving, honored everything that he had done for him. Brother Pate received the Holy Ghost, Sister Pate, and all of a sudden they could tell Benny the same thing. I got the Holy Ghost. I got the Holy Ghost.
Yes.
And of course we know that also the little boy deal worked out too. But he had a lot of help. Billy James Waddles and George Anasakis and Randy Dicus, Jan's brother, they visited Benny, encouraged him. And I talked to Billy once and I said, have you ever been depressed? He said, no, never. You can believe that, can't you, Brother Belton? He didn't know what it was to be depressed. But he knows how to talk to people, and along with Bubba and Randy, they encouraged Benny daily by visiting with him. And all the time, Benny was working like crazy to get better. And of course, he had the incentive. Jan says, as soon as you can walk up the aisle, we'll get married. And so that made him work that much harder. But the church has been around, Scott, for about 75 years. 4 churches have been born from it, millions of dollars to the kingdom. Souls saved, probably by the thousands. Some of the Scots saints are scattered in churches all over. But with that kind of prosperity, there's bound to be things crop up every now and then. And a long time ago, several years ago, it seems like that a lot of young evangelists would come through and they wanted to straighten us out. Well, we kind of felt like we were straight, you know. But the evangelists of the Lord one felt like we needed a little bit of extra TLC. But this is a page story that's straight eyewitness deal. This young minister, I don't remember what the topic was, but whatever it was kind of middle of the road, you know. And he was hammered, and when it come time, he paused for the amen. Nothing.
Yep.
So he said, amen! Just like this morning. Nothing. But you have to admire the young man's zeal. He thought, I'm going to see this through, Brother York. He said, I said amen!
You're on your own.
Just
On
like
your
that
own, brother.
again. And I kid you not, Benny was sitting on the front seat, right in the middle of the pulpit, by himself. Arms on both back of the pew like this. And when the minister asked for that third amen, he was like this, and you heard a dry voice say, preacher, looks like you're on your own tonight, brother. That's being paid. And you know, let me tell you the funniest thing about that, or the best thing about that, is whatever rebellion the church was feeling, or whatever spirit the preacher had, any way you want to write it up, whatever was happening there, the evangelist laughed as much as the church did. And I bet it probably scarred him to this day, though. But he laughed almost as much as the church, and then he preached really good. The church got behind him, and it was like the best thing that ever happened, and we had church that night. But that was Benny Payne. And for one story, you could tell dozens like that, but that was Benny. And of course, Brother Ron Patrick is the assistant pastor at Fort Smith. Very good man, coached the team. And as Benji said, only Benny could do it. But Brother Patrick would be coaching his team and talking to the refs and walking the sideline. And Benny would say real loud, you heard this voice say, sit down, bus driver. And there was nothing but smiles and laughs from Brother Ron Patrick, and acknowledging Benny, and everybody laughed about it. But that was Benny Payne. Larry Wood, I don't know if he's here today, but he was Benny's best man at his wedding. And he took Benny under his wing, gave him one of his first jobs, taught him the real important things of life, the essentials of life, the real essentials of life. Because he helped Benny get a truck, a boat, a four-wheeler,
All right.
guns, and got him in a deer club. And the stories that I've heard Larry and Benny tell me, we can only talk just about a few of them today. But it was something else. But as a young man, Benny, he had attributes that just gravitated toward trouble. And not just really as a young man, but adult too. But Benny caused so much ruckus on the school bus that there were some girls that just couldn't hardly stand him. And they waited on a time where they could get Benny back. Well, Benny broke his leg on a motorcycle accident, and that's what those girls were waiting on. Benny got off the bus. They got off too, right behind him. He took his crutches away from him first. Sounds terrible, don't it? got him down on the ground and started working him over. Now we know Benny, we know he stand pain. He's stood it for years. And we don't even know how severe it was, but I know he was in pain every day of his life and didn't even want to take medicine for it. Just was afraid of it. So we know he's tough and can take a lot of that stuff. But something about those girls hanging him down in that cotton patch, rolling around and beating on him, the tears were just rolling. And his mama heard so much of the commotion, she comes out with a broom and just waded in, beating people, knocking them off, saving the day. That was the kind of stuff that Benny got into. And he was like that when he got a little bit older. I'm reminded, when I think about Benny's life, I'm reminded of a Max Lucado story where this young child, the only baptisms that she had seen was baptizing in the titles. And so this little girl, she had a Barbie doll in the bathtub, and she was saying, in the name of the Father, in the name of the Son, and in the hole you go. And Max Lucado said, that's what a lot of people think Christianity is that you go into some kind of hole. But it's just the opposite. Yeah. You get life, and you get life more abundantly. Yeah. And you're not in a hole. And Benny went to juking on the dance floor where Larry Woods told me he was the best on the floor to make all of these moves. He went to juking for Jesus. That was Benny Payne. Benny made us all comfortable by poking fun at everything, making us laugh. But he had a serious side too that a lot of people didn't see. He was so non-confrontational that it was hard for him to even tell somebody, if he had two friends there disagreeing about something, Benny wouldn't hardly be the third person to say you're right or you're wrong. Even if he felt strong about it. He's thrown me on the bus many a times because he didn't want to hurt the other guy's feelings. And so, but that's just Benny. He hated confrontation. We all know that. But if there came a time when he had to feel like he had to stand up, had to say something, it took a whole lot for Benny. But over the years in life, there's times that Benny had to stand up and take a stand for different things. And it was so hard for Benny. It had to be so important to him. But I could tell stories about Benny for hours, I guess. My dear friend, at times of fervent prayer together, rejoicing in the Lord, comparing how we felt about different teachings of the Bible, agonizing for our children, unity in our churches and marriages, in our daily battles, in our journey to the kingdom. I'd just like to tell Benny Ray, it's been one more ride. I would never call him back to this earth because you won, Benny. You finished the race. You won. We will all be better for having Benny in our lives. If it wasn't for calling him back, I'd just like to do it all over again. I love you, Big Ben. I love you.